Hi everyone. I'm going to do this podcast, which is a bonus podcast and YouTube video, because I just thought it was useful to give you the 5 golden rules of podcasting. So this won't be a very long one, but it will just be something I will release midweek, and you guys can sort of let me know on whether this is useful, whether this is helpful to have this sort of in between one as well. So we've got 5 rules of podcasting. So number one is to podcast regularly. So I think it's critically important that you do it on a regular basis and let people know when you're going to release it. So I do one podcast a week, which is on a Sunday, and I release on a Sunday. I will record any time in that week, maybe at the weekend if it's an interview, and then I'll get it all ready and might even do it on Sunday, depending on workload and time available. So, but it is important that you podcast regularly and you do release on that day. So if it is a Sunday, you release every Sunday. It will build up people's trust in you that you are a reputable podcaster if you're doing that on a regular basis. And if you release, like, you might want to release through 3 to 5 when you start, to give people a flavour. But essentially, if you pack it all in, I think there's a bit of a, like, do 3 or 4 episodes in like 2 weeks and then do nothing for a month. I think that makes people feel unhappy and not want to subscribe and download to you. So I'd say podcast regularly, and equally you can do seasons. It's another thing that people will often do. I've gone away from doing seasons. There was a time where I stopped, which I've kind of called season 1. That was with the death of my mother, and therefore I needed some time off just to gather my thoughts and just reassess life, etc. So, but that's the only time that I've taken a period away from podcasting since when I started over a year ago. The other thing is, I think it's important to sort of do interviews. So I'm really just starting my sort of path of the interviews. A lot of my stuff has been solo conversations, as I'm doing now. I like this sort of place to give yourself space to be able to talk and share things, but I do think interviews are important. They bring out things into your audience that you don't get. You obviously probably do an interview for a longer period than you would do a solo. So I think interviews give the audience a great insight into someone else's mind and why they approach things, how they approach things. So I think it is important, and that's something which I'm going to really drill down on and try and get some interesting guests, friends, colleagues, sort of people I meet, people I find on social media. So look out for a few more interviews in the next few weeks, months. Third thing is, I think you need to promote your podcast, and I would use primarily or start with social media. I think it's a great untapped area for business. I think everyone's talking about it, but equally not enough people actually do it. So I would say there's forums, there's Facebook groups, there's advertising, soft advertising on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. They're the ones I tend to aim towards. There might be others which, like Reddit and Quora and things like this. There are other places where you can do it. I find Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as basically my best ports of call for being able to get social media access and get leverage there. I would say you need to plan your podcasts. Some of them might be rants, some of them might be prepared content, some of them might be just a response to something that's happened in the day, and there might be interviews. I would say for me, this is a very personal thing, I prefer to have some sort of content, something I've thought about over the week, something that is important to me, something that is I think is important to my listeners. So I do less rants. Might do a few rants on Instagram and just sort of short content. But I like to be able to prepare content. I like to be prepared for things. So I would say that that's really, really important. You should be able to prepare content and prepare for interviews. You might have a rant, something happens maybe not in your job, but maybe in your side hustle that's important that you share with people. So that's important. And then the fifth thing, which I kind of got in brackets, which I think is important, but maybe it depends on how important you think it is to promote your podcast. So you might want to do advertising on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, your SEO on Google or whatever. I think that's important to promote. I personally don't promote that much, don't advertise that much. I like the organic growth. Now, whether this ever turns into something that is substantial, has substantial numbers of downloads and supports, who knows? I'm enjoying doing it. I'm enjoying organically growing it and trying different experimenting ways of being able to get leverage and get people on board and listening and sharing, and so that's really important. So there's always a promotion side of the podcast. It just depends if you actually want to put money towards it. Have done a few I've experimented with a few bit of advertising. Twitter leverage was not so good. Instagram was a bit better, but I didn't like the way that Instagram really showed off where they wanted to go to after they clicked the link. So Facebook ads, people tell me it's great. Google is very expensive now. It's really up to you where you think you can get most leverage from. So you would want to promote, as I said, you would promote on social media, on Instagram, on your account, on Facebook, etc. But it's whether you want to actually put money to advertising. That is a completely different matter. Okay, so as I said, this was just a short sort of bonus podcast that I had in my locker, so I thought I'd record it. If you've got any thoughts, ideas and comments, then please leave them where I can find them. You can check out this podcast, Absolute Business Mindset, on YouTube here as well, also on Instagram, Twitter and Patreon and Facebook. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll speak to you soon.